So I'm just going for a bit of a ride here. So Mechtronics, let's go over that. Finished class today, all 3 of them. That was Total Mechtronics CAD class for computer automated design, and man, I can't remember the other one. Systems Approach, I think is what the other one is. I don't remember. But the first 3 you've got to take to get into either the associate's or the bachelor's degree. They have you all funneled through the same thing to kind of bring everybody up to speed if you're transferring in without any prior Mechtronics stuff. Main concept that you kind of take away from class is problem solving. You want to have that mindset, you know, have a logical approach to deciphering what the machine is telling you without just jumping in and grabbing stuff. You know, they're trying to be less shade tree mechanic, if you've heard of that, and more, you know, precision approach, which was cool. Not something I'd learned before, but you use your multimeter. You know, not as much as I would have liked. I was kind of depressed by that. We didn't really get the multimeter out half as much as I wanted to. It only actually was helpful twice, and I still don't quite understand how to take the readings, which I have to say is kind of a fail for me, not so much the class. But one of the test questions today, they had a lamp in a series circuit, and then they connected the multimeter to both sides of the lamp in a parallel configuration, and then it asked you what you'd be measuring. So I mean, if it was, and it was connected to a battery, so there was no off switch. So I would say that you would not be measuring resistance, because you'd want to measure the light bulb separately for that, or the wires separately for that. So it was definitely a measurement of voltage in my limited experience. And then it asked you it gave you 3 or 4 different, you know, 5 different multiple choice questions or answers, and then it gave you 2 that were, or I think actually even 3 of them were about resistance, and only 2 of them were voltage. And I went with one of the voltage ones, but I wasn't real clear on whether I got that one right or not. The test for the oh man, I can't remember the acronym. But it's the Siemens Level 1, or Siemens, however you want to say it, Level 1 test. And it was brutal. I am a pretty good test taker normally, and I've got a couple weeks to wait for the retest results. They don't give them to you immediately. And that was a little girl. They don't give them to you immediately, and I'm waiting to see if I pass the damn thing. They don't really tell you what the pass rate is in the class, but it's, to get a passing score, you don't have to score that high. I'll say that much. I'll leave it as a surprise for you. But I would say study your ass off. I studied quite a bit, I thought, and I had a pretty solid cheat sheet, because they allow you to take 1 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, handwritten. It said formulas, so I'm not sure about that part of it, but it said cheat sheet, so I cheated with it, and I used it for all sorts of stuff. I put everything I could think of on that damn cheat sheet. And then it was 2 hours, 60 questions. You've got about 2 minutes per question, and frankly, man, some of those took me 2 minutes to read, and then, you know, you got to understand them. They gave us 90 test questions in different test banks to practice, and I think about 5 of those transitioned over to the test, and the rest of the questions were brand new, fairly long, and I didn't feel any more prepared for this test than I did the first time I took this damn thing, or the first practice test back about 4 weeks ago. There isn't really a lot of study material. You've got their videos, but you know, what do you know, if it's not in their video, how are you supposed to know it? A lot of it is just logic based, and you have to learn to decipher it. I'm making this video more for myself than for anybody else, but at least this will help you pass the test maybe. But it's logic based, so if you've got, you know, 2 push button switches and you have a controller, you know, and then it has some kind of, you know, whatever sensor in between, the sensor needs to have a 1, you know, so for it needs to be closed so you can pass that power through there. And then you need, I think this is the way, I don't know if it is or not, but I'm going to stay here. I should have cut in front of them, but whatever. But this is a nice road too. I like this view right here. Boom. I'm just heading to the store here. But yeah, so it was logic based. So you've got this sensor on one side, and then you've got, so you need a 1 from that, and then you have a push button on one leg of the parallel circuit, and then you have another push button on the other side of it, but they're kind of bypassing. So if sensor A1 is got a positive signal, and then you've got push button 1 has a positive signal, then obviously it's going to make it down the chain. So it's kind of just mapping out these systems, and I thought I was pretty good at it, but the test is just, it's pretty fast paced for having to read all the junk. I almost kind of just perused stuff and then jumped right to an answer, which was not a very good strategy, I didn't think. But I didn't feel like I had enough time to read stuff. And then they have a really archaic system of taking the test. If you mark a question, it just piles it up with a whole bunch of other questions, and then when you go back and check your questions, you have to unmark it in order to remove it from the list, because you can't tell which ones you've already checked again for the second time when you go back through it. It's a real pain. And then the test just takes time to load. Like each question, probably 3 to 4 seconds on anything with a big map on it, or, you know, a picture. And then I had one that stuck and froze up on me, and I just kind of had to guess. And then when you're going back through each one of these, they got to load again. So I mean, I'd say 10% of my time was spent waiting on the system out of my 2 hours. But I got the first run through done with about 20 minutes to spare. Some guys had already gotten up and left, and I thought I was a good test taker, but I'd like to see their test scores. Or what they were studying, because I did not get what they were studying. I did not feel that prepared for it that I could leave early. But I sat there till the time went out trying to recheck my questions, which was not a great way to do it. Because that system was so kind of archaic and clunky. But the one tip I'd give you there is just once you go back, you mark something, mark only things that you really think you're going to want to check back on. And then once you go back to check them, unmark it, which takes a second or two for it to load. And then it will drop off your list and you can go to the next one and do it, you know, rationally. I would almost say, unless you're just a really quick and you know, sharp, that I would not mark anything that there's just no chance you're going to get it. Just put down your initial run and then just skip to the ones you think you can actually comprehend in the 2 minutes and decipher and move on. And you'll have more time than the 2 minutes, but you know, for the ones that are tough. Because like I said, there's probably 5 to 7 gimmies. Something you've seen before probably, and then the other, you know, 52 or 53, 54, those are all going to be new questions. So it was tough, and I didn't find that many easy ones. Definitely know your bearings. So I could tell you a bearing, but they had a question that had a whole bunch of bearings out there in front of you, and you needed to decipher, you know, taper bearing, needle bearing, roller bearing, cylindrical bearings, and I don't even remember the last ones, but I mean there was quite a few. Old boat out there, kind of cool. Definitely old and looks like it's about ready to sink. And then there was a lot of those questions that were, here's the system and why is it failing, look through it. And I didn't feel, I felt like the test prep that we did actually hindered me, other than the 7 questions, which I didn't feel like any of the ones that they gave us were even that hard of questions. Those were actually the easier ones out of the test bank. The harder ones out of the test bank are the long ones that have, a whole schematic you kind of got to decipher, and then you got to figure out which push button is doing what, and if the K1 latching logic, I'm like, come on. That was tough. And then let's see, what else would be a good strategy for this test prep once I go back and do this again, if I have to. I would say that you definitely want to be squared away on that logic kind of concept of what's going to work, and then a lot of different 5-way or 5-port 2-way is kind of something you'd need to know for your solenoids. And then there were a few of those questions. There was one on Pascal's law or theory. There was a couple of those, maybe. There was at least one. And then there was one on logic gates, or not logic gates. Actually, there wasn't any of that, which I kind of like logic gates. I would have been better at that. There was one that was Boolean logic table, the truth table. Crap, write that thing down on your damn notes. I wrote it down, and then I asked the instructor, hey, is this what you're talking about? And he was like, yeah, that's fine. And it was not fine. Write down the Boolean truth table. So it says like A and B false, A true, B false. I was like, what the hell is this? I don't even understand what it was. I must have missed that part of the freaking things they had. And then they had one question that was, it's 3 circuits that all kind of meet in the middle. They mentioned it on like 1 or 2 slides way back when, and I don't remember them actually, they didn't write it on the slide, so I didn't actually catch the name of it for some reason. So you definitely want to know your star and your delta circuits, whatever the hell those are, because like I said, I think I missed that whole part there. I don't remember even seeing that, other than that one page that had a picture of the delta or star circuit, but it didn't actually have it labeled on the damn slide. And when I reviewed it, I didn't pay attention to it because they acted like it was something we'd learn in the next course, which apparently you need to know it in this course. And I even think they said, we won't get too deep into this because you'll deal with that later. And it's like, well, we didn't deal with it later. I thought they meant next course later, but and then what else was there that was really kind of crappy? There was probably at least 10 or 15 of those ones that you were just like, it was, here's your PLC controller, here's where it's routed, and you have a failure on this thing. What would you check to fail? And they were not ones that we'd seen before that I knew of. They looked very alike, which was confusing, not helpful in my opinion. So it looked like a lot of the questions we'd already seen, but they were not the questions we'd already seen. And then some of the stuff didn't load, so you couldn't tell if it was a not, or like if it was a 2 answer questions. Sorry. If it doesn't load for you, then you can press 2. And he said to like raise your hand and do it, but it's like, I'm on a time crunch here. I don't have time to be messing around with the stupid archaic system. And it did look like archaic. I mean, I was like, this is kind of depressing how old this looks. It reminded me of like, a test from 95, or 2001. I don't know. I'm getting old, so I don't remember when that was. The tests looked like that, but it was not a great system. Like when I do the FAA tests, I've done tons of those. When you mark something, it just comes on a list, and then it shows it right there on the side. This had a whole separate little thing you had to toggle each time you wanted to go back and look at your test progress. Was a real pain. Yeah, cool. So let's see what else was there. I'm trying to remember these questions while riding. I'm probably not the best way to do it. But yeah, Boolean logic table, star and delta circuits. Figure out what the hell those are. Bearings. That's something you definitely want to know and be able to just boom, see them. Roller bearings, ball bearings. I don't know what the difference is there. Well, I do now, or I do. But you just have to have them in a lineup and pick the guy that did it. It's pretty tough. And they wanted all of them, so it was like, mix and match. And then needle bearings, look into those a little more. They had a roller bearing that had, when I think of needle bearings, I'm thinking pretty fine needles. But I think you could have a needle bearing that, had 1-inch needles, technically. It's just the design of the bearing, not specifically that they're small like needles, or tiny. So that one threw me off a little bit on needle bearings, because I was like, is that a needle bearing? It doesn't really look like one to me. It looked like more like a cylindrical bearing to me. Come on, it's not a freaking stop sign. Woo, sorry, I haven't been that exciting on the motorcycle part, have I? I try to keep it minimal speed. There's a lot of racers. You just saw, like, I don't know if you can see that on the thing, but that whole intersection had like 360s done. There's a whole bunch of speed racers that come down here and do stupid stuff on this road. If you stay at the campground, you hear them cranking it. Saturday and Friday nights especially, but the cops need to get down here more, and I'm sure they're probably gonna at some point. So I just kind of respect this road, and it's kind of a sketchy road to be doing anything dumb on. I mean, people can pull out of driveways here all over the place. That's how motorcyclists die. So yeah, I would say spend a lot more time really getting the... I mean, I'm pretty good about diagnosing stuff, but this was just a little more confusing. But definitely get that, the way they show you the Siemens questions is very, very specific. And they all look the same, which was, I was like, geez Louise, there's 5-10 of those questions that are all look the same. Yeah, see all these black marks on the road? Guy's doing 360 donuts here. Dumb. Ooh, missed a gear. So when you're shifting the BMW, I don't use the clutch very often anymore, but you got to have it coming up on the throttle, or going down if you're going down. Just don't be revving it. If you're going up with the throttle and you're pushing down, you're going to have a clank. But as long as you're accelerating, this thing is pretty damn good about it. Nice little road, huh? Drove all the way around here just to get this little part. 10-mile-an-hour turn. They ain't joking either, so slow down. It's actually a 90 here. And it's got that intersection. That's just stupid. I'm way too high. And then it ends right here too, so don't go crazy with that either. Lots more people live here too, so lots of driveways. That was the long way to the store though, I'll tell you. So yeah, I felt like it was kind of a fail on my part for the test prep. And I don't feel like there was much I could have done differently though as far as studying. I can whip through the practice test, but if I haven't seen a question and it's a totally new question for the test, it's going to take me, I feel like it's supposed to take you 2 minutes to diagnose something that's